Hi, Mark and Tamil Kenny with Think Multifamily. We're here to talk to you today about step 9, the due diligence period. Mark?
So we talked a little bit about it already, right? As far as the contract, the PSA is going to have the time frame for it. So let's just say time is 21 days as an example.
The 21 days that you have to perform your due diligence.
Right, and that's going to be physical due diligence, the property, looking at it, and then any financial due diligence you want to do. So you're going to engage a third-party company, or you should, unless you're a contractor and can estimate everything yourself. But you're going to engage a third party to come and inspect everything. Ideally, you should be there with them and walk through as many units as you possibly can. If it's 100 units, you want to make sure that you look at all 100 units.
So what happens if there are certain units that you can't get in for whatever reason? Maybe the tenants have changed the locks on you, or double locked and won't let you in, or there's vicious dogs behind the door. What happens then?
No doubt. So it has happened. It's happened to us before. We tell them that they need to drill the locks.
Okay.
So we're not gonna not look at a unit. Now, if you have 100 units, you don't get in one or two. You know, you make your own determination whether that's a big deal for you or not.
Right.
But we had 208 units. We couldn't get into 38 units. So they had to go back and drill all those locks.
Right.
So that's important, right?
Right.
And you're gonna look at everything, right? And then you're gonna do, like, let's say, a lease audit, right? So the lease audit is gonna take all the leases, and they're gonna look at them to see, are people paying what they are supposed to pay? Is there anything in the lease that I need to be concerned about, like maybe the promises around free cable? We had a property like that, had free cable.
Yeah.
Well, we wouldn't have probably normally done that. And you might have some tenants that don't have any leases at all, right? So usually you can do it yourself if you want to, if you know what you're doing. If not, have a property management company do the lease audit for you. They'll put a report together with all the potential issues that they see in the leases.
What happens if, say, you have 100 units and you find out that 10 leases are just missing? What happens then?
Then you're going to want to have the seller, put a lease together for them and have those tenants sign the lease.
Okay, good to know. And then you also want, for the lease audit, you also want to know how long their leases are. Are they a year, 6 months, 3 months?
Right.
We've even seen some leases that go like maybe 18 months.
Right.
We've even had a property management company at one point sign a lease for our place that was 2 years.
Right, which was against our policy that we had,
right.
But they did it anyways.
But that means you can't change the rent at all for those 2 years that current tenant is in that lease.
Not ideal,
right.
For sure. Month to month also, how many are month to month? Usually someone month to month should be paying a little higher, but you also have the risk that they can leave whenever they want.
Right, which could be good or bad based on the tenant.
How they are.
Right.
Right.
So what else do we look at for the due diligence?
Financial due diligence, you're going to go through things, let's say you have a rent roll, which we talk about in step 4, analyzing the deal, but you have a rent roll and it says, that you pay whatever, $800 a month. Well, I want to then make sure it's in the lease. I want to make sure it shows up on what's called the general ledger. And it's being recorded financially that you're paying $800 a month. I want to see that it actually shows up in the bank statement.
Right.
That your check for $800 was deposited. So it's actually, following the money basically and making sure that through the financial due diligence, and then also things like utility bills. If they're T12, profit and loss, we talk again about step 4, shows that there's a certain number of, $20,000 they paid for the year in utility. You want to make sure that's what they're actually paying. What else? Anything?
So another thing to consider when you're doing your due diligence is the cost of the due diligence process itself. Mark, can you tell our audience how much it costs to do due diligence?
It depends.
Okay.
But sometimes a property management company will do it for free. So if you're going to use them after you purchase a property to manage the property, they'll sometimes do it for free. But don't assume that.
Right.
Assume it's going to be $50, $60 per unit. So 100 units, $5,000 you're going to pay, a due diligence company.
Right.
Now remember, we talked about early access agreements. So if you have an early access agreement and you don't move forward with the contract, you're out that $5,000.
Right. So you mentioned $50 to $60 per door or per unit. Does that number change whether more or less based on, like, say you only have 20 units or say you have 500 units? Is that a flexible number?
Typically you have a minimum, depending who's doing it. So everyone does it differently. But sometimes you're going to have a minimum of, let's say, 2,000 or 2,500, even if it's a small property.
Okay.
But end of the day, you want to engage someone that does it for a living, right? It gives you the report with all the estimates in it, and that $5,000 you spend to do it is money well spent. Because if you don't do that, and you end up buying a property, and there are things wrong with it that you should have known, your investor's going to be upset with you.
Right. So one more thing that I want to cover with due diligence is we've looked at properties and we've bought properties that were 300 or 400 units, right? So our due diligence team, we want them to have multiple teams. Otherwise, it's going to take you a very long time to walk all of those units. So we like working with a third-party due diligence team or our property management company that works with teams that can bring in maybe 6 or 8 people so they can kind of divide and conquer.
Ask them that up front. How many units can they walk in a day? It should be roughly about 100 units a day that they can get through. So we had an experience, we looked at over 200 units and 2 guys showed up.
Yeah.
And then that's not ideal.
Right.
So the other just real quick thing about the due diligence is that we had some on our group too where they were like, well, we're all the people, right? And people are walking units, but people that do the roof, electrical, plumbing, they might show up 1 or 2 days later. They're not necessarily all there because they're kind of working around their schedule. But you want to do things and have them, scope the lines and things like that. But it doesn't necessarily happen the same day you're there.
Right.
But you need to make sure it happens.
So we talked about the time frame, the 21 days time frame to do your due diligence. That's kind of like a tongue twister, right? We want to keep in mind the tenants, right? So we don't want to disturb the tenants over long periods of time. We want to try to do all of the apartment, the inside inspections as quickly as possible so that we're not invading in their home because they live there, that's their space. So you try to do that quickly.
Yeah, and the property manager on site there will typically have to give 24 hours or more notice to the residents that they're going to come in and inspect. So they'll put a letter out to them.
And they put a letter out on their doors?
Typically the doors, and sometimes they'll do it if they're on email, but for a lot of the ones we look at, it's a physical letter.
Okay. Well, that's all we have for now on step 9, doing your due diligence. Stay tuned for step 10. Bye for now.
Bye.